The marble cracked under the impact of the metal baseball bat. 17-year-old Marcus Chen swung again, this time aiming for the outstretched hands of the Virgin Mary statue that had watched over St. Augustine Catholic High School for 71 years. His friends cheered from behind the brick wall of the chemistry building, their laughter echoing across the empty courtyard during lunch break. "Come on, Marcus! Hit her crown!" shouted Tyler, recording everything on his phone. Marcus raised the bat one more time, his dark eyes filled with a rage that had been building for 3 years, ever since his mother's cancer prayers went unanswered. The statue's serene face remained unchanged as pieces of her blue robe chipped away. Donated in 1952 by the Moretti family after they lost their only son in Korea, she had been the silent witness to decades of student prayers, graduation ceremonies, and quiet moments of faith. Her hands, eternally extended in blessing, had been touched by thousands of teenagers seeking comfort during their darkest hours. Now those same hands bore fresh scars from Marcus's fury. "This is what your miracles look like." Marcus spat at the statue, his voice carrying across the prayer garden where roses bloomed around weathered stone benches. "Where were you when my mum was dying? Where were you when she begged you to save her?" The final blow sent a spiderweb of cracks across the statue's base, and Marcus threw the bat aside, breathing heavily as his friends applauded his rebellion. Before we go deeper into this mystery, take a moment to subscribe to Virgin Mary Mysteries. Stories like this are too powerful to experience alone. As you follow this story, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and write "Mother of Mercy" if you believe in the power of second chances. I want to see how far this message of redemption reaches. But what Marcus didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Sister Catherine had been watching from the administrative building's second-floor window. The elderly nun had served St. Augustine's for 43 years, and she had never seen such deliberate desecration of the sacred space she tended with devotional care each morning before dawn. Her weathered hands clutched her rosary beads as she witnessed the attack, her whispered prayers barely audible in the empty hallway. The afternoon bell rang, and Marcus strutted back to class, his chest swollen with pride at his act of defiance. Tyler's video was already spreading through social media, garnering reactions that ranged from shock to admiration from his classmates who had grown tired of the school's strict religious requirements. Marcus felt invincible, finally free from the weight of faith that had crushed him with its empty promises. At 3:47 p.m., as students poured out of the building toward waiting buses and cars, someone screamed. The sound cut through the usual chaos of dismissal like a blade, freezing everyone in place. Sarah Martinez, a sophomore who always stopped to pray at the statue before going home, stood motionless in the courtyard, her backpack fallen at her feet, her hand pressed to her mouth in disbelief. The Virgin Mary statue stood perfect and whole, exactly as it had for 7 decades. Not a single crack marred her marble surface. Not one chip disturbed the flowing lines of her blue robe. Her hands extended in blessing, as if Marcus's violent attack had never happened at all. Marcus Chen had not always been filled with such consuming rage. 3 years earlier, he had been the altar server who arrived 30 minutes before daily mass, carefully arranging the chalice and paten with reverent precision. His mother, Eleanor, would drop him off at the church doors each morning, her tired smile brightening as she watched her son serve with quiet devotion. She worked double shifts as a hospital cleaning lady to keep Marcus enrolled at St. Augustine's, believing that faith and education would give him opportunities she never had. The Virgin Mary statue in the school's prayer garden had been Marcus's refuge during those early years. Between classes, he would slip away to kneel on the smooth stones surrounding her marble base, whispering prayers for his mother's chronic back pain and his father's drinking problem. The statue's gentle expression seemed to offer the comfort he couldn't find at home, where bills piled up and arguments echoed through paper-thin walls of their cramped apartment. Elena Chen received her cancer diagnosis on a Tuesday in October during Marcus's freshman year. Ovarian cancer, stage 3, the doctors explained with clinical detachment that felt like ice water in Marcus's veins. That night, he knelt before his bedroom crucifix until his knees bled, bargaining with God for his mother's life. He promised perfect grades, perfect behavior, a lifetime of service, anything to spare the one person who had never stopped believing in him. The Moretti family had commissioned the Virgin Mary statue in 1952 after losing their 18-year-old son, Anthony, in the Korean War. Mrs. Moretti had insisted that Our Lady's hands be carved in a gesture of welcome rather than prayer, wanting the statue to embrace the grief of anyone who approached. For 71 years, those marble hands had indeed welcomed countless students carrying burdens too heavy for young shoulders, failed tests, broken hearts, family struggles, and spiritual doubt. Marcus spent 18 months watching cancer devour his mother's body, while the Virgin Mary statue remained silent in her garden. Elena attended every chemotherapy session with her rosary beads, her faith never wavering even as her hair fell out, and her weight dropped to 87 pounds. She would sit by Marcus's bedside each night, too weak to stand, whispering novenas to the Virgin Mary until her voice gave out entirely. The night Elena died, Marcus was kneeling before the school statue at 2:47 a.m., having climbed the fence in desperate fury. His phone had been buzzing with calls from St. Mary's Hospital, but he refused to answer, knowing what the silence meant. Instead, he screamed at the marble figure until his throat was raw, demanding explanations that never came. Sister Catherine found him there at dawn, collapsed against the statue's base, his Catholic school uniform soaked with dew and tears. His father, David Chen, had stopped attending Mass the day they buried Eleanor. The man who once led family rosaries now spent his evenings at Murphy's Tavern, drowning his grief in whiskey and regret. Marcus watched his dad disappear into a haze of self-destruction, while bills went unpaid and the apartment filled with the stench of abandonment and sorrow. But tomorrow morning, Marcus would discover that some acts of vandalism awakened forces that cannot be explained, understood, or ignored. Marcus arrived at school the next morning with a swagger in his step, expecting to see the broken statue as a monument to his rebellion. Tyler had already shown the vandalism video to half the junior class, and Marcus basked in the whispered conversations and shocked stares that followed him down the hallways. He had finally done something that mattered, something that expressed the fury burning in his chest since the night his mother drew her last breath. But when he rounded the corner toward the prayer garden during first period break, his confident stride faltered. Students clustered around the statue, their voices hushed with bewilderment. Sarah Martinez knelt on the stones where marble fragments should have been scattered, her fingers tracing the statue's base in disbelief. The Virgin Mary stood exactly as she had for 71 years, pristine, unbroken, serene. Marcus pushed through the crowd, his heart hammering against his ribcage. This was impossible. He had felt the bat connect with marble, heard the satisfying crack of stone, seen pieces of the blue robe fall to the ground. Tyler's video proved it had happened. Yet here stood the statue, perfect in every detail, as if his attack had been nothing more than a fever dream. "Check the security footage," he muttered to Tyler, who was staring at his phone in confusion. The video from yesterday showed Marcus swinging the bat, showed the statue breaking, showed the damage he had inflicted, but the statue before them bore no evidence of violence. Not a scratch, not a chip, not even a discoloration where his blows had landed. Principal Morrison arrived with 2 maintenance workers and Brother Francis, who had overseen the school's grounds for 28 years. They examined the statue with expert eyes, running their hands over marble that should have been scarred. Brother Francis shook his head slowly, his weathered face creased with wonder rather than anger. "I've never seen anything like this," he whispered to Principal Morrison. "The stone shows no signs of repair work, no fresh mortar, no color variation. It's as if nothing happened. If this story is pulling you in, subscribe now and tell me in the comments what you believe is really happening. Your insight might reveal something we haven't seen yet. The security office became Marcus's next stop, Tyler trailing behind with nervous energy. Officer Rivera, the school's security coordinator, pulled up the footage from the courtyard cameras with practiced efficiency. They watched Marcus approach the statue at 12:43 p.m. They watched him swing the bat. They watched the damage occur exactly as Tyler's phone had recorded. But then at 11:47 p.m., something extraordinary happened on the surveillance feed. The cameras went dark. Not off, not malfunctioning. Completely black, as if someone had draped cloth over every lens aimed at the prayer garden. For exactly 4 hours and 13 minutes, the screens showed nothing but impenetrable darkness. At 4:00 a.m., the cameras resumed normal function, revealing the statue in perfect condition. "Power grid shows no interruptions," Officer Rivera muttered, checking his logs with growing unease. "Equipment diagnostics show all systems functioning normally. I've never seen anything like this in 15 years of security work." Marcus stared at the timestamp, his hands trembling. 4 hours of darkness, 4 hours when something had worked in the shadows to undo his destruction. What force had moved through St. Augustine's halls while the school slept? And why did he suddenly feel like he was being watched by eyes he could not see? By Thursday afternoon, Marcus found himself serving detention in Sister Catherine's classroom, staring at equations on the blackboard, while his mind churned with questions that had no rational answers. The elderly nun graded papers in silence, occasionally glancing at him with an expression that seemed more curious than disapproving. Outside the windows, October rain drummed against glass, creating shadows that danced across the walls like fingers reaching toward him. Sister Catherine had been at St. Augustine's long enough to witness unexplained events before: sudden healings during prayer circles, students receiving warnings about family emergencies, moments when heaven seemed to touch earth in ways that defied human understanding. She watched Marcus fidget with his pen, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the way his hands shook slightly when he thought no one was looking. At exactly 3:27 p.m., Marcus heard something that stopped his breathing entirely. A voice, clear as spoken words but coming from no visible source, whispered directly into his consciousness, "Your sister is in danger. The playground. Go now." The voice was feminine, gentle but urgent, carrying an authority that bypassed his logical mind and spoke directly to his heart. Marcus shot upright in his desk, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Sister Catherine, I have to go home. Now!" The words tumbled out before he could think. "Something's wrong with my sister." The nun looked up from her grading, studying his face with eyes that had seen generations of students in crisis. Something in Marcus's expression, a mix of terror and certainty that couldn't be faked, made her reach for her desk drawer. "Take my car keys," she said quietly, tossing them across the room. "Drive carefully." Marcus had never driven Sister Catherine's ancient Honda, but desperation gave his hands steadiness as he navigated the familiar streets toward Riverside Apartments. The voice echoed in his mind, urgent and insistent. The playground, danger, hurry. His 8-year-old sister Emma always went to the complex playground after school, supervised by Mrs. Patterson from 3B until their father stumbled home from whatever bar had claimed him that day. He skidded into the parking lot at 3:41 p.m., abandoning the car with the engine running. The playground sat empty except for Emma, who was climbing toward the highest swing, her small hands gripping rusty chains that had seen 20 years of weather. The metal frame groaned ominously in the wind, and Marcus noticed what had been hidden from ground level. Several bolts had worked loose from their concrete anchors. "Emma, get down from there!" He sprinted across wet grass as the first support post shifted visibly. Emma turned toward his voice, her face lighting up with surprise at seeing her brother. That moment of distraction caused her to lose her grip, and she dropped safely to the rubber matting just as the entire swing set collapsed, with a thunderous crash of twisted metal. The massive frame landed exactly where Emma had been swinging moments before. If Marcus had arrived 30 seconds later, if the voice hadn't warned him, if he had ignored the impossible urgency in his chest, his sister would have been crushed beneath 200 pounds of rusted steel. Emma ran into his arms, crying and shaking, while Marcus stared at the wreckage and wondered what force had spoken his sister's salvation into existence. Friday morning brought news that sent shockwaves through St. Augustine's halls. Sister Catherine would be taking medical leave immediately. Her decades of service interrupted by a diagnosis that Brother Francis delivered to the faculty with barely controlled emotion. Ovarian cancer, stage 2, discovered during a routine examination that had been postponed too many times. The irony struck Marcus like a physical blow. The same disease that had stolen his mother was now stalking the woman who had shown him unexpected kindness. During morning mass, Marcus knelt in the back pew while Father Rodriguez offered prayers for Sister Catherine's healing. The elderly nun sat 3 rows ahead, her silver hair catching candlelight as she fingered her worn rosary beads. Her shoulders, usually squared with confident authority, seemed fragile beneath her navy cardigan. Marcus found himself whispering prayers he thought he had forgotten, muscle memory of faith stirring despite his anger toward heaven. At 11:15 a.m., as Marcus walked past Sister Catherine's empty classroom, the voice returned with startling clarity. "She cannot take Highway 36 today. Death waits on that road at 12:30. Tell her now." The words crashed into his consciousness with such force that he stumbled against the doorframe, his heart racing as he processed the impossible message. How could he approach a respected nun with warnings from a source he couldn't name or understand? Sister Catherine was cleaning out her desk drawers when Marcus appeared in her doorway, his face pale and urgent. She looked up from packing decades of teaching materials, noting the familiar expression of desperate certainty she had seen in her classroom yesterday. "Sister," Marcus began, his voice hoarse with tension, "I know this sounds crazy, but you can't drive to the hospital using your normal route today." The nun set down a stack of graded essays, giving Marcus her complete attention. 43 years of teaching had taught her to recognize when students carried burdens too heavy for young shoulders. "What route should I take?" she asked simply, without skepticism or dismissal that would have crushed his fragile courage. "Avoid Highway 36 completely. Take the back roads through Morrison, please." Marcus's hands trembled as he spoke, knowing how insane his request sounded. "Something terrible is going to happen there around 12:30, and you can't be anywhere near it." Sister Catherine studied his face for a long moment, remembering the playground incident that had saved his sister, remembering the mysterious restoration of the Virgin Mary statue. She had lived long enough to recognize when grace moved through unexpected channels, even when those channels came wrapped in teenage rebellion and unresolved grief. "Thank you, Marcus," she said quietly, placing her hand briefly on his shoulder. "I'll take the Morrison route." At 12:31 p.m., a semi-truck carrying hazardous chemicals jackknifed on Highway 36, causing a 6-car pileup that closed the highway for 8 hours. Emergency responders later confirmed that anyone traveling that stretch between 12:25 and 12:35 would have been caught in the devastating collision. Sister Catherine arrived safely at University Hospital using the Morrison route, but Marcus was left wondering why heaven had chosen him, a boy who had attacked its most sacred symbols, to become an instrument of salvation. That evening, Marcus sat at the kitchen table pretending to study while his father moved through their apartment like a ghost haunting the scenes of his former life. David Chen had returned from Murphy's Tavern earlier than usual, his movements unsteady, but his eyes carrying a dangerous clarity that made Marcus's stomach clench with unspoken dread. Empty beer cans lined the counter like soldiers, and Marcus noticed his father's hands shaking as he rummaged through kitchen drawers with increasing desperation. The apartment felt suffocating with unspoken grief. Elena's photograph still covered the refrigerator. Her coffee mug remained unwashed in the sink. Her reading glasses lay untouched on the windowsill where she had left them 18 months ago. David had transformed their home into a shrine to his dead wife, while slowly destroying himself with alcohol and self-recrimination. At 8:47 p.m., the voice returned with devastating clarity. "Your father has hidden pills in the bedroom drawer. Tonight he plans to join your mother. Stop him before it's too late." The words hit Marcus like ice water, and he suddenly understood his father's strange behavior. The way David had hugged him too tightly that morning, the careful arrangement of bills on the kitchen counter, the resignation in his eyes that Marcus had mistaken for ordinary grief. Marcus found his father sitting on the edge of his parents' bed, staring at a bottle of prescription painkillers left over from Eleanor's final weeks. The orange container trembled in David's weathered hands, and tears streamed down his unshaven face as he counted out pills with mechanical precision. Beside him lay a letter written in his careful engineer's handwriting, folded and addressed to Marcus in faded blue ink. "Dad." The word came out as a broken whisper. Marcus stood in the doorway, watching his father's shoulders shake with silent sobs. "Please don't do this." David looked up with eyes that held the same desperate pain Marcus carried in his own chest. "I can't do this anymore, son. I can't wake up every morning knowing she's gone. I can't pretend to be strong when everything inside me died with her." His voice cracked on the words, and the pill bottle slipped from his fingers, scattering white tablets across the faded bedspread. Marcus crossed the room and knelt beside his father, gathering the pills with shaking hands. "I need you here, Dad. Emma needs you. Mom would be furious if you did this." For the first time since Eleanor's death, Marcus wrapped his arms around his father's shoulders, feeling how much weight David had lost, how fragile he had become beneath his facade of stoic endurance. They sat together on the bed where Elena had spent her final weeks, father and son finally sharing the grief they had carried separately for 18 months. David sobbed against Marcus's shoulder while Marcus whispered the prayers his mother had taught him, both of them holding on to each other in the wreckage of their shattered family. But tomorrow would bring a crisis that would test everything Marcus was beginning to understand about grace, sacrifice, and the mysterious forces that had chosen him as their reluctant messenger. Monday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth that made the chemistry lab's poor ventilation feel oppressive to everyone except Mr. Davidson, who had taught advanced chemistry at St. Augustine's for 22 years. Third period was his favorite class. 18 students working on complex molecular equations while sunlight streamed through tall windows that hadn't been opened since the building's renovation in 1998. The smell of cleaning solvents hung heavy in the air, mixing with the faint odor of sulfur compounds from last week's experiments. Marcus sat in the back row, trying to focus on balancing equations, while the voice that had become his unwelcome companion remained mercifully silent. Since Friday night's confrontation with his father, he had begun carrying his mother's rosary beads in his pocket, fingering the worn silver links whenever anxiety threatened to overwhelm him. The familiar prayers provided comfort he couldn't find anywhere else. At 10:43 a.m., as Mr. Davidson demonstrated proper handling of hydrochloric acid, the voice exploded into Marcus's consciousness with terrifying urgency. "Gas leak behind the eastern wall! Evacuation now! Explosion in 7 minutes! Save them!" The words struck him with such force that he gasped audibly, drawing curious stares from his classmates. His hands went instinctively to the rosary beads as he processed the impossible warning. Marcus shot to his feet, his desk chair clattering backward. "Everyone out, now! Gas leak!" His voice cut through Mr. Davidson's lecture like an alarm bell. But the teacher's expression shifted from irritation to concern when he saw the absolute terror in Marcus's eyes. The same expression he had worn when warning about his sister, about Sister Catherine, about his father's crisis. "Marcus, sit down and—" Mr. Davidson began, but Marcus was already moving toward the emergency exit, gesturing frantically for his classmates to follow. Sarah Martinez, Remembering the mysteriously restored statue and the stories spreading through school about Marcus's impossible warnings, grabbed her backpack and headed for the door. Others followed her lead, confused but trusting the growing legend of the boy who somehow knew when danger approached. Within 90 seconds, the entire chemistry lab had emptied into the courtyard, students clustering around Marcus while Mr. Davidson reluctantly called the maintenance department. Marcus knelt beside the Virgin Mary statue, his hands pressed against the marble base as he whispered desperate prayers for the safety of everyone inside the building. Other students watched him with expressions ranging from skepticism to awe, unsure whether they were witnessing a breakdown or a miracle. At 10:51 a.m., a deafening explosion shattered the chemistry lab's eastern wall. The blast sent glass fragments cascading across empty desks and chairs, demolished the demonstration table where Mr. Davidson had been standing moments before, and filled the hallway with acrid smoke that triggered every fire alarm in the building. Emergency responders later confirmed that a decades-old gas line had ruptured behind the wall, creating a pocket of combustible vapor that ignited when it reached the pilot light on the emergency eyewash station. If 18 students and their teacher had remained in that room, the casualties would have been catastrophic. Now, every eye in St. Augustine's was fixed on Marcus Chen, waiting to see what impossible thing he would do next. The storm that hit Denver on Tuesday evening arrived with nature's fury, transforming the October sky into rolling black clouds and electric violence. By 6:30 p.m., wind gusts reached 60 miles per hour, bending the ancient oak trees surrounding St. Augustine's until their branches scraped against windows. Marcus had remained after school for counseling with Dr. Patricia Hoffman when his phone buzzed with calls from Emma, who was staying with Mrs. Patterson while their father attended his first AA meeting since Eleanor's death. At 7:14 p.m., David Chen's voice crackled through static, slurred and desperate. "Marcus, I'm sorry. I couldn't. The pain is too much. I took..." The line went dead, leaving Marcus staring at his phone while thunder shook the building. Dr. Hoffman saw the terror in his face and immediately understood their session had become secondary to a family emergency. Marcus ran toward the parking lot, but the buses had stopped running due to the storm's intensity. Desperation drove him back toward the prayer garden, where the Virgin Mary statue stood, illuminated by lightning flashes, her marble surface gleaming like silver in the supernatural light. If the voice that had saved so many lives was real, he needed it now more than ever. He fell to his knees on the soaked stones, rain plastering his hair against his forehead as he pressed his palms against the marble base where his baseball bat had once struck in anger. "Please," he whispered, his voice lost in the storm's roar. "I know I don't deserve this. I know I broke you, turned my back on everything you represent. But my dad is dying, and Emma needs him, and I can't lose anyone else." The confession poured out of him like 18 months of buried grief. "My mom prayed to you every day, and I thought you abandoned us when she died. But you've been speaking to me, using me, saving people through me even when I didn't want to listen." At 7:29 p.m., as Marcus's desperate prayers reached their crescendo, lightning struck the Virgin Mary statue with a force that should have killed him instantly. The electrical discharge illuminated the entire courtyard in brilliant white light, visible from every classroom window where faculty members had remained during the storm. But instead of destruction, the lightning flowed through the statue and into Marcus, surrounding him with pure energy that left him untouched. The lightning strike left Marcus kneeling peacefully beside a statue that now bore a single hairline crack running from the Virgin Mary's heart to her outstretched hands, a crack that seemed to glow with soft internal light. Marcus's phone rang at 7:31 p.m. The paramedic was calling from his apartment, where David Chen had been found unconscious but alive, discovered by Mrs. Patterson when she went to check on him after the storm knocked out power to the complex. 6 months later, Marcus Chen knelt before the Virgin Mary statue in the pre-dawn darkness, a ritual that had replaced his former rebellion with something deeper than simple faith. The hairline crack that ran from her marble heart to her outstretched hands caught the first rays of sunlight, seeming to pulse with gentle luminescence that defied scientific explanation. Brother Francis had consulted structural engineers, art restoration experts, and even geologists, but none could explain why the crack appeared to glow, or why it had enhanced rather than diminished the statue's beauty. David Chen had survived his overdose and completed 90 days of sobriety, attending AA meetings with the same devotion Marcus now brought to his morning prayers. Father and son worked together to rebuild their shattered family, carrying Elena's memory as inspiration rather than crushing grief. Emma had started attending St. Augustine's elementary program, often joining Marcus in the prayer garden where she would whisper secrets to the lady in blue, as she had learned to call the statue. Students sought Marcus out daily now, not as a curiosity or miracle worker, but as someone who understood that grace often arrived through unexpected channels. Sarah Martinez brought her college application anxieties to the garden bench beside the statue. Tyler, whose phone had captured the original vandalism, now helped Marcus tend the rose bushes that bloomed with unusual abundance around the sacred space. Sister Catherine had completed her cancer treatment successfully, returning to teach with renewed vigor and a knowing smile whenever she encountered Marcus in the hallways. She never spoke publicly about the highway accident she had avoided, or the mysterious warnings that had saved so many lives. Some mysteries, she believed, were meant to inspire faith rather than satisfy curiosity. The crack in the statue had become a pilgrimage site of sorts, drawing visitors from neighboring parishes who came to pray before the Virgin Mary figure that bore visible evidence of divine intervention. During evening prayer services, when votive candles surrounded the statue's base, the crack seemed to breathe with soft light that brought comfort to anyone carrying burdens too heavy for human shoulders alone. Marcus understood now that his moment of greatest rebellion had become his doorway to grace. The bat he had swung in anger had somehow opened his heart to hear the voice that spoke protection, healing, and hope to those who needed it most. His destruction of the sacred had paradoxically prepared him to become its guardian. If this story moved you, subscribe to Virgin Mary Mysteries so you never miss the next chapter in these extraordinary mysteries. On quiet afternoons, when sunlight painted the prayer garden in shades of gold and amber, Marcus would trace the glowing crack with reverent fingers and whisper gratitude for the miracle of second chances. The Virgin Mary's marble face remained serene, her hands still extended in eternal blessing, but now she bore the beautiful scars of a love that transforms even our deepest rebellion into instruments of divine mercy. If this story touched your heart, write beautiful scars in the comments below. Let's create a prayer chain of everyone who believes that our broken places can become conduits for miracles we never expected.